Hello, everybody. Intuition here. Thank you, as always, for making time and space for us. Today, we would like to discuss the topic of working with conflict. We realize that many individuals have issues when it comes to addressing conflict, whether it be within a certain situation or between another person and yourself. It seems that dealing with conflict or addressing conflict is something that many individuals tend to avoid. And usually they tend to avoid it based off of the precipice of, if I engage in this conflict, then I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to extinguish it. Either I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to extinguish it, meaning it will escalate based off of my response and reactivity, or I simply want to avoid it altogether because it will not lend to a pleasing situation. I want to maintain having a pleasing relationship between me and the other individual. And if I engage, then it might not end in us maintaining this false sense of connectivity based off of me foregoing a sense of myself to please you. And so we would like to provide tools with how to better deal and address with conflict. Because at the end of the day, when you don't know these two major things and what the difference between them are, you will not be able to manage conflict with ease, or as much ease had you had these in your tool belt. And the best way to deal with conflict is knowing the difference between being assertive and aggressive. Much of, again, the reason why conflicts even ensue is because we do not understand the difference between those two things, and because we couple being assertive with being aggressive and see them as the same thing. We simply think that there is no other option other than me rising in my anger, rising in my frustration, rising in my tone of voice and energetics to address the perceived conflict. And so the difference between being aggressive and assertive is that aggression comes from a space and place of anger. Aggression does not come from being level-headed. It comes from something or somebody touching on something that is raw. And in you feeling as though you need to protect whatever it is that that person touched that is raw, you become reactive and aggressive to back that person away from the perceived threat in which they are touching on. But when I'm aggressive with somebody, especially when there is a conflict, and feel like that is the only way to resolve the conflict because this person is yelling at me, or they're raising their theatrical gesticulations, or I just don't like their tone, and then therefore the only response is for me to be aggressive back with them, then you are just causing you to meet the person where they're at and them having to try meet you where you're at, and that just keeps on building the bar higher and higher and higher until it extinguishes itself by both of you being enraged, and who could yell the loudest, who can discharge the most anger in a way that imposes fear on the other so that they back down. And so, understandably, why many of us would want to avoid that altogether and simply remain in a more pleasing aspect of the relationship. But again, we do not need to move into aggression when we know the difference between aggression and being assertive. When I'm assertive, that means that it is coming from a clear place. It is not coming from anger. It is not coming from frustration. When I'm assertive, I am clear in who and where it is that I am. And I am not feeling threatened or disturbed by another person, regardless if they're yelling in my face, regardless if they're pushing me around, literally or figuratively. I remain undisturbed, unfazed. I simply can assert with a clear level head that whatever it is that they're doing is unsatisfactory, and I do not need to engage in their theatrics. I do not need to meet them where it is that they're at or try and impose fear. Because when you are assertive, that means, again, you are clear in your boundaries and you're able to communicate that in a way that is clear to the other person. And if they are not willing to hear what those boundaries are, if they're not willing to respect those boundaries, then you are still in your right mind in assertion to have an action step take place. That action step is I walk away. That action step is I'm no longer participating in this communication. I no longer need to be in your presence any longer. Whereas if you're coming from a place of aggression, it doesn't end until one person backs down, until one person secedes. And it better not be you. But when you come from assertion, you say, I'm not even playing this game. Because it is a game, and I don't need to become aggressive to prove a point. There is this saying that the most dangerous person is the quietest person in the room. Because the quietest person in the room does not need to be the loudest person in the room. They do not need to prove anything to anyone. They keep to themselves until it is the appropriate moment to express or share what is most important for them. And that holds more power than the loudest person in the room or the person that was chatting away the whole time. And so in the same lens, in being assertive, when it comes to conflict, again, I'm going to choose not to play this game. I'm not going to allow for the conflict to evolve into anything other than a mere dispute. I'm going to de-escalate it from a conflict to, well, we just disagree, by me being assertive. However, if I'm aggressive, then it is a conflict, and that conflict has the potential to move into something far greater, far more dangerous. So how we deal with conflict is to be assertive. And in order to be assertive, you have to come from a clear, calm place. And it's best to know what your boundaries are when you're being assertive. Because if you don't know what your boundaries are, then you don't really know what it is that you're asserting to be assertive. You just have a vague template that does not really lead you in any clear direction. So to be assertive, you need to be clear on your boundaries and what it is that you do or do not want to get out of this interaction. And to express that again in a calm, collected way so that everybody can understand, and should they choose not to understand, then you have options. But if you become aggressive, you don't really have any options other than to end the conflict by being the loudest person in the room, the most aggressive person in the room. And you don't really win in that sense. Both of you are losers, even if you are the loudest person in the room, because you had to get angry to prove a point. And if you have to get angry to prove a point, was it really worth it? Just to be right. So, as always, just a little food for thought. We wish you well, understanding the difference between being aggressive and assertive, and how that could be a helpful tool as you continue to work through the conflict and turmoil within your life. As always, thank you for making time and space for us.